There's a story on the project tonight talking about Three Waters, and after our chat last night, I thought let's have a look at that tonight because it spells out a bit more about Three Waters, including this idea of who owns the pipes. Remember that conversation came out last night, and I actually read out the legislation that talked about councils owning the infrastructure. But there are a lot of people who are saying things like, we keep ownership in our city. We want to own it. We want to own it. So unless I'm missing something massively, and look, I might be, it looks like local entities still do own the pipes. And that was talked about a bit on the project. So I kind of have played this both for me to hear from again, but for you guys as well, just to kind of, what we try and do is build up that, I guess, foundation of knowledge to pull from, to find out what is the truth in all of this and what is groundswell. Basically, it's the truth and what groundswell says. They're the two parts of this. So let's have a look at this item from the project tonight, and then we'll have a chat about what it's got to say in here. And George, you've got some things you want to pick up on from someone who sent us some information last night as well, eh?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's look at the item first.
In 2016, the residents of Havelock North got something a little extra in their taps.
5,000 people, a third of the town, sick with gastro after Campylobacter contaminated their water supply.
In the end, it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix. At least 4 people died. Couple that with poo geysers in Wellington, no swim notices in Auckland, and thousands getting crook every year.
Spewing and sort of shitting all over the place and wasn't very good.
And we have a problem on our hands.
Our infrastructure in New Zealand is tired.
Cue the government's solution, the Three Waters program. It's a complete overhaul of how the country manages drinking water, wastewater and stormwater. Right now, most of our water is looked after by our local councils. The government's proposing that control of that water infrastructure is given to 4 publicly owned entities. Councils would still own all the pipes and stuff, but they wouldn't control them. It's a huge shake-up, and the main argument for this plan comes down to money. It's estimated it'll cost up to $185 billion to fix everything.
This is a significant burden on councillors who already cannot afford to invest the amount required.
What it means, says the government, is those...
I'm just going to pause it because it's probably good to acknowledge some of these things as we go along. The Nai Mahuta, they're talking about this is a financial burden on councils. So the government is coming in saying we're going to take that burden off councils, and councils are going to own the pipes. That's what it's just said and what we said last night. And there's pushback. No, we want to keep it all ourselves. We want to pay the ratepayers to pay more. And so it's I just want to make sure that we're getting the gist of this as we're going through as well. 185 billion to fix up the pipes either comes from central body or it comes from ratepayers. It's sort of like sometimes when we start a conversation from a different place, and the conversation here really probably should start from the infrastructure needs to be upgraded. Who's going to pay for it? Are we going to pay for it from a collective body, or are we going to pay for it from ratepayers? They're really the only two options. And if it's going to be a collective body, i.e. everyone puts into the pool, then the government's involved, because it doesn't seem to make much sense for it to come from the central government. In other words, we all pay for it, and then councils telling the central government to go fuck themselves and they're going to do it how they want. I don't know if it can work that way. I guess that's what I'm saying. We keep going, George?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
4 chonky boys could borrow more money than councils can and fund the bigger projects needed to fix and maintain everything. They say it'll cost us less.
Without reform, ratepayers will see increases in their water bills. So we don't want to change the fundamentals of these reforms that are designed to make sure we don't see exponential increases.
Well, I'm sold.
Hang on there, Ted Danson, because these guys have some issues.
It's a loose ball that's popped out of a really nasty ruck.
The mayors of Auckland, Christchurch and Waimakariri want to rethink on Three Waters. The concern is that councils and residents will lose control of their water assets to faceless bureaucrats.
You'll still have 3 layers of very remote bureaucracy between you and the actual assets that you used to have only one layer being your local council.
And the regions might end up getting lost in the mix.
We've got 1.5 million people who live in Auckland and a collective of 200,000 in the region. So how does our voice be heard?
It's been a rough old ride for the government and the waters are still churning. Select committees and public consultation are up next before the reforms have any chance of becoming law. The bottom line is you're not going to stop hearing about this anytime soon.
So there you go. I hope you understand it a wee bit better now. We didn't even get into co-governance there, which you might have heard a bit about as well. Co-governance, this idea, to use Bernard Hickey's words today, that woke Wellington has a plot to take our water and give it to iwi. He says that's not true. But, I mean, people feel really, really strongly about co-governance. So there is, I guess, a chance that people will scrap this plan for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some legitimate concerns about a change as big as this, but honouring treaty obligations and having some Māori at the table of these sort of 4 entities that they're talking about, I don't think is scary. I think it's actually a really good idea and nothing's
something of a red herring. Yeah, when you've got hundreds of billions to get and you can only get it from ratepayers, taxpayers, or people who pay for water directly, as we do in Auckland, no one's going to like whatever you suggest.
Yeah. I mean, and fair enough, but if we can kind of stop thinking about it as a personal cost to us as individuals and think of the cost of it as an investment in the future. I mean, nothing's working now and the population's going to keep growing and we're going to want to keep drinking water, crazy kids. So we've got to do something.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Honestly, that's crystal clear to me now.
So are you for or against Three Waters?
Yeah. So moving on, I think. Is that what
I actually think that's a really interesting point at the end, and I talked to you about this before the show. So I think that was Kim Crossman, yeah? Actress Kim Crossman. It's funny because I've done a couple of podcasts with her and I recognize the voice. She's got a new look. I'm pretty sure that was Kim Crossman. And I don't know why it's become such a scary issue to talk about. So for people who then go, well, you know, what do you think then? I'll tell you. I think there has to be a change. Our infrastructure is fucked. We either pay for it as ratepayers or we pay for it from the central government. If the central government is going to be involved, they're going to control some aspects. Even if what David Seymour says is correct, there's now 3 layers of bureaucracy and there used to only be 1. I don't know if that's accurate, but let's say that it is. So what it is ratepayers don't have to pay for it and there's 3 layers of bureaucracy. Or ratepayers can pay for it. You pick, right? The flip side to that is I also know, and I've said this before, that there are some regions who the ratepayers can't pay for it. You know, some of our neighbours down here in Dunedin, down in Clutha, can't pay for it. The bill is too high. There aren't enough ratepayers. So that's either going to become a third world state with its 3 waters, or it's going to be funded by central government anyway. So I'm okay as a ratepayer. So this is not me talking about someone else's money, and a taxpayer. I'm okay having the consolidated fund to help the areas who need it. And I'm okay with thinking about this issue like it is a national emergency, much like a natural disaster would be. When there's a natural disaster, we get around that area and the country pays for whatever they need, no questions asked. How come 4 deaths in Havelock North isn't being considered a national disaster and we're not just actively getting around them to help it out? Now, let's say Havelock North gets taken care of. What about all the other regions that need that, or they're going to be next year's Havelock North? So I'll happily put my hand up. And I'm not doing this because I'm going, yes, Labour. I'm doing this because it seems to make sense that if it needs to be fixed, and it does, right? It does need to be fixed. Either the local ratepayers pay for it or the consolidated fund pays for it, which is all of us. I'm happy to throw my hat into the consolidated fund. Whatever you want to call that, I'm okay with that. So let's do this, yeah? This is what I'll try and do. Let's try and get someone from the government on. I mean, let's start at the top, try and get Nanaia Mahuta. When we get rejected roundly by your office, let's start to work down. And let's start to ask some of these questions. And let's try and figure it out. Because it really does feel to me that when you start to go through this logically, which I think I've done, albeit with some emotion added in, that it seems that the only real complaint that a lot of people have with the current Three Waters model is the involvement of iwi, the so-called unelected involvement of iwi. Because I think when you look at it financially, there's not that much of an argument to be said that 1 million widgets are going to cost less than 1,000 widgets. You know, that if, remember, you may have an asset in your council that are the pipes, but if those pipes need work that is costing more than what the value of those assets are, it's actually a debt in your ledger as well. So it's not quite as black and white. Like if you own a house worth $1 million, but your mortgage is 1.2 million bucks, that's not an asset, it's a debt. You know, so if the work on your pipes needs more done to it, costs more than the value of the pipes, it's not actually an asset, it's a debt. And different councils are going to be different in different areas. As I said, if you're living in a urban area, you're probably doing okay. If you're living in a rural area, you're probably struggling, because purely you don't have the ratepayer or the ratepayer base to cover off the costs. Because you think if you're living rurally, the length of the pipes can be very similar, if not longer, than living urbanly, but you've got far fewer ratepayers amongst all those paddocks to pay for those pipes that are going all the way down. Hence, places like Clutha, and I know I talk about them all the time, but just because they're our neighbour, being basically in a situation where they actually cannot do it. Financially, they cannot do it. So they either fall over or get centralised. And then what? If we've got a different model for it. Anyway. So look, let's try and get someone on. Let's try and get someone on. And I mean, gosh, if we get someone on, get them on live on a Friday night or something, maybe people can.
I think
questions.
There's also some confusion in the chat around this word nationalising. I understand. I mean, literally nationalising might be a fitting word for this, but this isn't nationalisation of our water services. Strictly speaking, we're not, for example, nationalising the pipe companies that make the pipes and install the pipes and all that kind of thing. You know, someone might, like myself, with my ideology, might like that sort of idea, but that's not what's sort of going on.
And let me also say, when I was talking about unelected iwi on a board, what I'm making very clear is that seems to be the only complaint left to those people who are against it. I'm not saying that's my complaint.
Yeah, they definitely, which is why that woman didn't want to touch this, among other reasons, among bigger reasons. I think that people like David Seymour have successfully poisoned the discourse around this, made it about this word co-governance, made it about the wokesters in Wellington, as the other quote from the project put it.